Okay, grade 7, this is your triangle and parallelogram final test. If you have any questions, raise your hand and I'll press pause in the video and we can address your questions. Question 1 says a parallelogram and a triangle are related by area. A parallelogram is half the area of a triangle. The answer for that, of course, is false, because a parallelogram is always twice the area of its corresponding triangle. Question 2, this triangle's area is a larger number than its perimeter. So the first thing I need to do is actually calculate the perimeter, and the perimeter is really the distance around the entire shape. So 10 plus 10 plus 8 would be its perimeter, which is 28 meters. This distance here, the height, is not necessary for its perimeter, because perimeter is just the distance around the outside of a shape. So the area, however, does require that 9, because the formula for that is base times height divided by 2. And I don't know how many students forgot to divide their area of triangles by 2, but a lot of you did half of them by dividing by 2 and half of them without dividing by 2, and that's a pretty important part. So the base is 8, the height is 9, divided by 2 is really half of 72, which is 36 square meters. So the triangle's area is a larger number than its perimeter. That is true. The area is 36, the perimeter is 28. Question 3, the number that represents the area of this triangle is the same as its perimeter. Let's double check this one. So the perimeter would be 3, 4, and 5, which is going to be 12 meters. And its area will be base times height divided by 2, which is half of 12, which is 6 square meters. So the answer, of course, for this one is false. I love using this question on tests because those of you who forget to divide a triangle's area or base times height by 2 would have said true there, right? You forgot to divide it by 2. Question 4, the area of these two shapes is the same. So for this particular one, it's a parallelogram, which means we use the formula base times height. And for this one, it's a triangle, so we use this formula. This would simply be 8 times 2, which is an area of 16 meters squared. This one would be 4 multiplied by the height. And the height of this triangle, again, just like the first question, is the perpendicular distance to the base. So that's 4 as well, divided by 2. Half of 16 is 8 meters squared. Are they the same? No, they are not. So the answer is false. They are not the same. Question 5, a triangle with a base of 8 centimeters and a height of 10 centimeters has half the area of a parallelogram with 4 and 20. So the best thing you probably could do is simply draw both shapes. So this is a 10 and an 8, and this parallelogram is a 20 and a 4. Okay. Once you have them drawn, you can do your formula for the triangle and your formula for the parallelogram. This will be 8 times 10 divided by 2, which is 80 divided by 2, which is an area of 40 meters squared. And the other one would be base times height, which would be 20 times 4, which would also be 80 centimeters squared. Not centimeters or meters. I meant centimeters over here too. So are they the same? Yes, they are. They are the same area. So the answer is true. Question 6, the height of a parallelogram is always perpendicular to its base. So if I draw a parallelogram and I draw the height is always perpendicular, which is a big fancy word for 90 degrees. This one here is not 90 degrees to the base, and therefore I cannot call this the height. The height has to be that perpendicular distance from the base to the height. Question 7 says, Kent wants to cover his parallelogram-shaped backyard with turf. I think we all have parallelogram-shaped backyards, but anyway. The parallelogram has a base of 16 meters and a height of 10 meters. So the first thing I'm going to do is just draw it, just to make sure I have this idea in my head of what it looks like. It's 16 meters this way, and the height is 10 meters. So if I calculate the area of that backyard, I'm just going to use base times height, or 16 times 10, or 160 square meters of area. And if turf costs $5 per meter squared, it should be a square there. I guess it didn't come out in the print. If it costs $5 per square meter, how much will it spend? So I'm going to multiply this by 5, and I get $800, which is D. The cost of turfing that backyard will be $800. Question 8, calculate the area of this parallelogram. Base times height will be 8 times 5, which is 40 centimeters squared, which is C. Question 9 says find the area of the parallelogram with a base of 5 and a height of 7 and a side length of 8. So it kind of did a little bit of a throw off here. It gives you these dimensions, and the piece of superfluous or unnecessary information is this 8. That is just meant to mislead you. It's not important for the data. And when I take this and do multiply the base times the height, I get the 35 centimeters squared. Question 10, calculate the area of this triangle. It will be the formula base times height divided by 2. I still think there's a lot of you out there who still screw that up and use base times height. But anyway, 12 times 9 divided by 2 will be 108 divided by 2, which is 54 centimeters squared, which is A. Question 11 says the base of a triangle is 10, so I'm going to draw it. Of course, a good strategy is always to draw something that's not drawn for you. The base is 10 centimeters. The height is 14 centimeters. So base times height divided by 2 will be 10 times 14 divided by 2, which is 140 divided by 2, which is 70 centimeters squared. Now we come to question 12. It was the perfect score wrecker. Not one of you got a perfect score on your test, and it was probably because of this question. Most of you, and when I say most of you, I mean 90% of you got this question wrong. Okay, so let's look at this question. It says a parallelogram and a rectangle. Oops. I actually meant for this question to be this. I had no idea that I had rectangle in there. It was supposed to be triangle. A parallelogram and a triangle was supposed to be the question. Have the same base and height measurements. What do you know about the area of these two shapes? But since it is a rectangle, so I'm going to put down the parallelogram and I'm going to draw the rectangle. And I'm going to put let's put 8 for this, and 6 for this, and 8 for this, and 6 for this. We know that if we drew those two there, they both have areas of 48, which is, the answer is C. They're the same. However, if it was actually worded the way I wanted it to be, and it was this, then a triangle who has a base and height the same as a parallelogram's base and height, the answer would have been there half as much. So that's what I tried to make the question, and unfortunately I got it wrong. So the answer for this question is C. And question 13, a parallelogram and a triangle, there's my question, have the same base and height measurements. What do you know about the area of the two shapes? The area of the parallelogram, the area of the triangle is half the area of the parallelogram, A. So 12 and 13 I had backwards when I corrected them. I apologize. So your answer for that one is A as well. Question 14 says, what is the area of this triangle? So this piece of information right here is 5.7. That is an unnecessary piece of information for the area. You have simply base times height divided by 2, or 4 times 4 divided by 2, or 16 divided by 2, or 8 square meters as your area. So the answer for that is 8 square meters. Question 15, what is the area of this triangle? Again, you're going to have base times height divided by 2, or 30 times 40 divided by 2, or 1200 divided by 2, or 600 meters squared is your area. The 16th question says, what is the area of the gray prism? So in order to figure it out, you probably had to develop it into a composite shape, or two shapes merged into one. In this particular case, I can make it into a rectangle and a triangle. This triangle, if I was to redraw it right here and then bring it over here, would have a base of 4 and would have a height also of 4, because that's 4 over there. So it would be 4 times 4 divided by 2, or half of 16, which is 8 square meters. So this part here would be 8 square meters. And if this whole thing is 9 and this part is 4, that means that this distance here must be 5. Since it's a rectangle, length times width would be 4 times 5. This would be 20 meters squared. And therefore, the gray prism in total would be 28 meters squared. Okay. Some of you had 36. That's because you took the triangle and decided not to divide it by 2. You just said, to heck with it, I'm going to go base times height instead of base times height divided by 2. Question 17 says this square, a very important piece of information right there, has a triangle cut out of it. So if I was to think of this shape, I'm going to ungroup it for a second here. Oh, maybe I don't have to. I just do. Oh, I can't. Okay, I have to keep it like that. So it says this shape, this square has a. So if it was a red square, this red square right here would have been a 6 meter by 6 meter square, which means the area of the red square without anything cut out would have been 36 meters. This triangle was cut out of it. Oh, hello. There we go. And the triangle, obviously, this is still 6 meters from here to here because it's a square. So that's 6 meters. The height of that is 5. So 6 times 5 divided by 2 would be 15 square meters. So 15 square meters were cut out of a square that was 36 meters. So the work you needed to show was 36 take away 15 equals 21 square meters remain. Okay? 21 square meters of red square remain. Question 18, a little bit trickier for some people. It says this equilateral triangle has a square cut out of it right here. So we know this to be a square, and we know that its edge length is 2. So if I was to redraw this square down here, it would be 2 meters by 2 meters by 2 meters by 2 meters if I wanted to. But the area of that white square is length times width, or base times height, or side times side. The area of that cut out part is 4 square meters. Now, if this distance here was 2 meters, okay, and this distance here, so I know that the base of that red triangle was 6 meters. So I'm going to draw that triangle right here. 6 meters was the base. But the height of this distance is 6. This continuing distance from here to the bottom is an additional 2. So the height of that triangle is 8 meters, right? You see it from here to here as being 6, from here to here being 2. So the whole distance would be 8. So base times height will be 6 times 8 divided by 2, or half of 48, which is 24 meters squared, would be the whole red triangle with nothing cut out. So the red triangle itself is 24 meters squared. Take away that square, which is 4 square meters. I think that's right, isn't it? Is that right? Yeah. The area of the remaining red would be 20 meters squared. Okay? Question 19 says, what is this right triangle has area of 20 meters squared and a perpendicular distance of perimeter of 22.4 meters. What are the missing side lengths? So we know that x plus y plus 9.4 had to equal the perimeter, which was 22.4. So whatever the values of x and y is, we knew that that had to be true. So if I use my basic algebra sense and subtract 9.4 from both sides, x plus y themselves had to equal 13. Okay? So the first thing I know, using that perimeter statement, is that x and y together had to be a value of 13. So the values could have been, if I made a chart, we could add 1 and 12. We could add 2 and 11. We could have 3 and 10. We could have 4 and 9. We could have 5 and 8. We could have 6 and 7. Those are all of the values, and we go backwards again, 7 and 6, and so on and so forth. Those are all of the values of x plus y that equal 13. But only one of them, if I was to take x times y, only one of them, sorry, that's not 13, that's 22. So the product of x and y, or x times y, those are what all x times y would equal. So if 1 times 12 is 12, 2 times 11 is 22. So we know that x times y is all of those numbers. But since the area is 20 meters squared, that means the x times y, or the base times the height, divided by 2, that base times height had to be 40, because once I divided it by 2, I would end up with the area of 20 meters squared. So therefore, the only pair that works is that one right there. X being 5 and y being 8, or vice versa, 5 and 8 doesn't matter. But the two missing values have to be 5 and 8. That's the only way you can get an area of base times height divided by 2 that works to give you the area. Question 20 says Bob is painting the front of his house. What is the area he needs to paint? So if I break this into a composite shape, I have a rectangle and a triangle. The area of the rectangle would be 5 multiplied by 4. The area of that particular part of the front of the house would be 20 square meters. Since this is 5 meters and the whole thing is 8 meters, that means the distance from here to here must be 3. This distance here is 4. So base times height divided by 2 will be 4 times 3 divided by 2 will be 12 divided by 2. The area of the triangular part that makes up that front of the house will be 6 square meters. So the whole front of the house is 26 square meters if there was no doors or windows. But there is. So 26 meters, take away the door. The door is a 2 by 1 rectangle, which means it has an area of 2 square meters. That square window has a length of 2 meters, which means its area would be 4 square meters, because 2 by 2 is 4. And therefore, the amount of surface that needs to be painted on the front of that house is 20 square meters. All right? Now, if one can of paint can cover 6 square meters and costs $48 a can, how much does he need to buy? How much will it cost to paint the house? Well, 3 cans won't be enough, because 3 cans will only cover 18 square meters. And you can't buy a part can, so you need to buy 4 cans. And how much will it cost? Well, 4 times 48 is $192 to paint his house. Question 21 is a question that a lot of people got wrong, and it's inexplicable because I have no idea why this one caused a lot of pain to people. It says, what is the perimeter and area? So I'm going to do area first because that's the easy one, base times height. It's going to be simply 4 times 3. The area was 12 meters squared. But for whatever reason, the perimeter threw people. The first sentence says, this parallelogram has sides that are all equal in length. So if I redraw this parallelogram here, this is 4 meters. This all has to be 4 meters because the first sentence says they're all equal in length. That 3 is not the side length of the parallelogram. That 3 is the height of it, which has nothing to do with the perimeter. So the perimeter is 16 meters. Okay? And what is the sum of those two? The answer would be 28 would be the sum. And you can't say meters or meters squared because you're just adding two numbers that aren't related. Finally, the last question, determine the area of each polygon, round your answer. So a triangle with a height of, so you do base times height divided by 2, or 4 times 8 divided by 2, or 32 divided by 2, which is 16 centimeters squared. It says round your answer to the nearest tenth. Now some of you thought that meant round your answer to the nearest 10. And a tenth and a 10 are not the same number. A tenth means 1 decimal place. A 10 is a completely different number. So if y'all rounded to the 10, if you showed your work, I gave it to you. I said, no problem. I see your answer. You just misinterpreted the rounding part. I'm not going to mark it wrong because of that. But if you didn't show any work and just had an answer and I couldn't see what you did, I couldn't give you the mark. For the parallelogram, it's 45 centimeters squared. That's 9 times 5. For this triangle, it's 4.5 times 3.3 divided by 2. Definitely need a calculator for this one. So 4.5 times 3.3 equals, divide that by 2. The area for this one is 7.425 centimeters squared. And your last one is just a parallelogram, so it's just 2.8 multiplied by the height, which is 4.9. Answer is simply 13.72 centimeters squared.